Millionaire saw young cashier girl and was stunned when she arrives. In this captivating story, we delve into an unexpected encounter between two seemingly different worlds. A millionaire, accustomed to a life of luxury, crosses paths with a young cashier girl who works tirelessly to make ends meet. This chance meeting not only surprises him but also profoundly impacts his perspective on life.
Alexander Morgan, heir to the Surge energy drink empire, gazed out at the city from the window of his luxury penthouse. At 32 years old, he had everything: money, power, recognition. However, an inexplicable emptiness gnawed at him inside the extravagant parties. Private jet trips and magazine covers no longer filled the void that grew day by day in his heart. He scanned his spacious living room, filled with expensive artwork and designer furniture. Everything seemed so empty, so devoid of meaning. He sighed deeply as he poured himself a glass of aged whiskey. How was it possible to feel so alone while surrounded by so many people? His phone vibrated. It was a message from Valerie, his personal assistant. Board meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Topic: expansion of the organic product line. Should I confirm your attendance? Alexander responded with a curt yes and tossed the phone onto the sofa. Another meeting, another decision about products he wasn't passionate about, another opportunity to feign interest in front of a group of executives hungry for success and dividends. He approached the window again and observed the people on the street, tiny figures moving hurriedly, each with their own story, their own dreams and worries. What were their lives like? What motivated them to get up each morning? A thought struck him like lightning. What if he could experience the life of an ordinary person? What if he could, even for a moment, strip away his last name, his fortune, the expectations everyone had of him? The idea began to take shape in his head. Why not? He had the resources to do it. He could create a false identity, blend in among common people, experience life from another perspective. Perhaps then he could find that something he was missing, that spark he had lost somewhere along the way. With renewed energy, Alexander headed to his bedroom. He opened the spacious walk-in closet and searched among his designer suits for something that could pass unnoticed. He found some worn jeans he rarely wore and a simple t-shirt. He looked in the mirror and barely recognized himself. It was a good start, but he would need more to go unnoticed. He picked up his phone and called Richard, his trusted bodyguard. "Richard, I need you to get me some things for tomorrow, and please let this stay between us." On the other side of the city, in a small apartment in the Meadowbrook neighborhood, Carly Sullivan finished clearing the table after dinner. Her son Max, 7 years old, played with his toy cars in the living room, while the TV broadcast the day's news. "Mom, can I stay up a little longer? Please," Max pleaded with puppy dog eyes. Carly looked at the clock. It was already 9:30 p.m., and tomorrow she had to be at the supermarket at 7 a.m. for her shift. However, the hopeful look in her son's eyes was stronger than her fatigue. "All right, sweetie. Half an hour more, okay, but I don't want any complaints about getting up tomorrow." Max jumped for joy and hugged his mother tightly. Carly couldn't help but smile. These small moments were what gave her strength to keep going, to face the long hours at the supermarket, the bills that piled up, and the constant worries. She sat next to her son on the small sofa and hugged him on TV. A report showed the latest high society party. The cameras focused on a young, attractive man stepping out of a luxurious car. Alexander Morgan, heir to the Surge empire, arrived accompanied by international model Sophia Cruz. Rumors of a possible romance. Carly changed the channel. These stories of the rich and famous seemed so distant, so foreign to her reality. What did they know about real-life worries? About having to stretch a paycheck to make ends meet? About sleepless nights when Max was sick? About the daily struggle to give her son a better future? "Mom, will we ever have a car like that?" Max asked, pointing to the luxurious vehicle they had just seen on TV. Carly stroked her son's hair tenderly. "Sweetie, there are much more important things in life than expensive cars. What really matters is the love we have for each other, our health, and being good people. Don't you think?" Max nodded, although Carly wasn't sure if he really understood. How could she explain to a 7-year-old that money wasn't everything in life when they lived with so many limitations? She looked at the clock again. It was time for Max to go to bed. Tomorrow would be another day of hard work, another day of smiling at customers while juggling bills in her head. "Let's go, champ. It's time to sleep. We have to get up early tomorrow." As she tucked Max in, Carly couldn't help but think about the future. Would she manage to give her son the opportunities she never had? Could she someday stop worrying about money and simply enjoy life? With a sigh, she turned off the light in Max's room and headed to the kitchen. She still had to prepare lunch for the next day and review the month's bills. The life of a single mother wasn't easy, but Carly was determined to persevere, no matter how hard she had to work. Meanwhile, in his luxury penthouse, Alexander prepared for his great adventure. Tomorrow, for the first time in his life, he would experience what it was like to be an ordinary person. What he didn't know was that this day would change his life forever. The morning arrived, with the first rays of sun filtering through the curtains of Alexander's luxurious penthouse. For the first time in a long time, he woke up with a mixture of nerves and excitement. Today was the day he would put his plan into action. He dressed in the jeans and t-shirt he had chosen the night before Richard, his bodyguard, had gotten him a cap and sunglasses to complete the disguise. In front of the mirror, Alexander barely recognized himself. The millionaire heir had disappeared, giving way to an ordinary man. "Are you sure about this, Alexander?" Richard asked, concerned. "I can accompany you incognito if you want." Alexander shook his head. "I need to do this alone, Richard. Trust me, I'll be fine." With his heart racing, Alexander left his building through the service door, avoiding the paparazzi who always lurked at the main entrance. For the first time in years, he walked the city streets without anyone recognizing him. It was a liberating sensation. After walking for an hour, exploring neighborhoods he had never visited before, Alexander found himself in front of a supermarket. His stomach growled, reminding him that he hadn't had breakfast. He decided to go in and buy something to eat. The supermarket was bustling with activity. People of all ages roamed the aisles, comparing prices, choosing products. Alexander felt overwhelmed for a moment. He had never done his own shopping. There had always been staff to take care of that. Wandering through the aisles, he picked up some random products, a loaf of bread, a package of ham, a bottle of water. As he headed to the checkout, his gaze met that of a young cashier. For an instant, the world seemed to stand still. The cashier had beautiful honey-colored eyes and a warm smile that lit up her whole face. Despite the evident signs of fatigue in her expression, there was a spark of kindness and strength in her gaze that instantly captivated Alexander. "Good morning. Did you find everything you were looking for?" the cashier asked kindly. Alexander took a second to react. Yes, thank you," he stammered, suddenly feeling nervous. As the cashier scanned his products, Alexander couldn't help but notice her name tag, Carly. "That'll be $15.50, said Carly, snapping Alexander out of his trance. Alexander searched his pockets and pulled out a $20 bill. When Carly handed him his change, their fingers brushed for an instant. Alexander felt an electric current run through his body. "Thank you for your purchase. Have a nice day," Carly said with a smile. Alexander nodded awkwardly and left the supermarket, feeling confused and excited at the same time. What was happening to him? Never before had a woman affected him this way. He decided to sit on a nearby bench to eat his improvised breakfast. As he absent-mindedly nibbled on the bread and ham, he couldn't stop thinking about Carly. There was something about her, an authenticity that strongly contrasted with the people who usually surrounded him. From his position, he could see the supermarket entrance. Without really knowing why, Alexander found himself waiting, hoping to see Carly again. Hours passed and the sun began to set. Finally, he saw the young cashier leave the supermarket. Carly walked briskly, probably eager to get home after a long day at work. Alexander watched her walk away, feeling an inexplicable need to know more about her. At that moment, he made a decision. He would come back tomorrow, and the day after, and every day necessary, until he gathered the courage to talk to her beyond a simple supermarket transaction. Meanwhile, Carly arrived at her small apartment, exhausted, but happy to see Max, who greeted her with a big hug. "Mum, Mum, look what I made at school today," Max exclaimed, showing her a colorful drawing. Carly smiled, forgetting for a moment how tired she was. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Let's put it on the fridge for everyone to see." As she prepared dinner, Carly couldn't help but think about the strange customer from that morning. There was something about him, a vulnerability in his gaze that contrasted with his appearance. For a moment, she wondered if she would see him again. She shook her head, pushing those thoughts away. She had no time for fantasies. This was her reality. Long work, hours, bills to pay, and a wonderful son to raise. There was no room for anything else. What Carly didn't know was that her life was about to take an unexpected turn. Fate had set in motion a series of events that would change both her life and Alexander's forever. That night, at opposite ends of the city, both Alexander and Carly went to sleep with a strange feeling of anticipation. Something had changed, though neither of them could explain exactly what the clock struck midnight. A new day was about to begin, bringing with it new opportunities, challenges, and perhaps the start of a love story that would defy all expectations. The following days became a routine for Alexander. Every morning he woke up early, put on his disguise, and headed to the supermarket. He would buy something small, usually a bottle of water or a cereal bar, just to have an excuse to go through Carly's checkout line. Carly, for her part, began to notice the constant presence of this mysterious customer. At first, she didn't give it much importance. After all, many customers were regulars at the supermarket. But there was something in this man's gaze, a mixture of curiosity and nervousness, that caught her attention. One day, as Carly scanned a bottle of water, she decided to break the ice. "You seem to really like this brand of water," she commented with a friendly smile. Alexander, caught off guard, took a moment to respond. Yes, it's refreshing," he stammered, feeling like a nervous teenager. Carly laughed softly. "It must be for you to come every day to buy it." Alexander felt his cheeks redden. Had he been that obvious? "The truth is," he began, searching for a credible excuse, "I'm doing research on consumer habits. Yeah, that's it." Carly raised an eyebrow, amused. "Research? Sounds interesting. Is it for college?" Alexander nodded quickly, grateful for the out Carly had unknowingly provided. "Exactly, I'm studying economics." "Wow, that must be fascinating," Carly replied, genuinely interested. "I always wanted to study, but life had other plans, for me." For a moment, Carly's smile faltered, and Alexander could see a glimpse of sadness in her eyes. He felt a pang in his heart. What story was hidden behind that look? "That'll be $2, $50, said Carly, bringing him back to reality. Alexander paid, and gathering all his courage asked, "Would you like to get coffee sometime to talk about economics and stuff?" Carly looked at him surprised. For a moment, Alexander feared he had crossed a line, but then she smiled. "That would be nice," she replied, "but it'll have to be on a day I'm not working. I have a son and my free time is scarce." Alexander's heart skipped a beat. A son. He hadn't expected that, but far from discouraging him, it only increased his curiosity to know more about Carly's life. "Of course, whenever you can," he said, trying to hide his excitement. "I'm Alex, by the way." "Carly," she responded, pointing to her name tag with a playful smile. "But I guess you already knew that." They exchanged phone numbers, and Alexander left the supermarket feeling like he was floating. For the first time in years, he felt genuine excitement, a real connection with someone. Over the next few days, Alexander and Carly began to talk more during their brief encounters at the checkout. He learned that Carly's son was named Max and was 7 years old. She discovered that Alex lived alone and worked from home as a freelance consultant. One afternoon, as Carly finished her shift, she received a message from Alexander. "How about that coffee tomorrow? I know a quiet place near the park." Carly looked at the message, hesitating. It had been a long time since she had gone out with anyone. Her life revolved around Max and her work. But there was something about Alex that intrigued her. He seemed different from other men she had met, After picking up Max from her neighbor's house, who looked after him after school, Carly made a decision. "Max, honey, would you like to spend tomorrow afternoon with Grandma?" Max nodded enthusiastically. He adored his grandmother and her stories. Carly took a deep breath and replied to the message, "Okay, tomorrow at 4 p.m, send me the address." On the other side of the city, in his luxurious penthouse, Alexander looked at his phone with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. She had accepted. Now how was he going to maintain his facade of an economics student? And what if someone recognized him? He decided he would take all necessary precautions. This was his chance to get to know Carly outside the supermarket environment, to discover what it was that attracted him so much to her. That night, both Carly and Alexander went to sleep with a mixture of nerves and expectation. Neither of them could imagine how this simple coffee date would change the course of their lives forever. The sun was shining brightly when Carly arrived at the cafe Alexander had suggested. It was a cozy place, with wooden tables and hanging plants that gave it a fresh, natural feel. Nothing ostentatious, Carly thought, feeling relieved Alexander was already there, sitting at a corner table, when he saw her. "Enter." He jumped up, almost tripping over his chair in his haste. "Hi," said Carly, laughing softly at his nervousness. "I hope I didn't keep you waiting long." "Not at all," Alexander replied, feeling like a teenager on his first date. "I just got here." A lie he had been there for an hour, mentally rehearsing his cover story and making sure no one recognized him. They sat down and ordered their drinks, a cappuccino for Carly and an Americano for Alexander. There was an awkward moment of silence before Carly decided to break the ice. "So, Alex," she began, "tell me more about this research of yours. It must be fascinating to study people's consumption habits." Alexander felt his mouth go dry. Here it was, the moment of truth. How long could he keep up this lie? "Well," he said, clearing his throat, "it's a study on how people make purchasing decisions in everyday situations. You know, what influences their choices, how price affects them, brand loyalty." Carly listened with genuine interest, asking intelligent questions that put Alexander's knowledge to the test. To his surprise, he found himself enjoying the conversation. Years of business, meetings, and market studies allowed him to speak on the topic with some fluency. As the conversation flowed, Alexander felt increasingly relaxed. Carly had a way of making him feel comfortable, of making him laugh with her witty comments and sharp observations. "You know," Carly said after a while, "working at the supermarket, I've seen all kinds of buying behaviors. I could write a book about it." "I'd love to hear some of your stories," Alexander replied, genuinely interested. Carly began to recount funny anecdotes about peculiar customers, offers that caused stampedes, and the strange combinations of products some people bought. Alexander found himself laughing more than he had in years. As time passed, the conversation became more personal. Carly talked about Max, her eyes shining with pride as she described how intelligent and curious her son was. Alexander listened, fascinated by the strength and love that emanated from this woman. "What about you?" Carly finally asked. "Family? Girlfriend?" Alexander shook his head. "Just me, my family." He hesitated for a moment. "We're not very close." It wasn't a complete lie. Despite appearances, Alexander had always felt distant from his parents, who were more interested in business than in forming a close relationship with their son. Carly nodded understandingly. "Sometimes the family we choose is more important than the one we're born into," she said softly. Those words touched something deep. In Alexander, he felt a lump in his throat and had to take a sip of his coffee to hide his emotion. The hours flew by, and before they knew it, the sun was starting to set. Carly looked at her watch and startled. "Oh my God, I didn't realize how late it was. I have to go pick up Max." They got up. Hurriedly, Alexander insisted on paying, despite Carly's protests. "I invited you, remember?" he said with a smile. They left the cafe and walked together to the bus stop. There was an energy between them, a connection that neither could deny. "I had a really good time," said Carly, looking at Alexander with a shy smile. "Me too," he replied, feeling his heart race. "Maybe we could do this again sometime." Carly nodded. "I'd like that." The bus arrived at that moment. Carly said goodbye with a quick hug that left Alexander breathless. As he watched her leave, he felt a mixture of happiness and guilt. The afternoon had been wonderful, but every moment had been tainted by his lie. How could he build something real, something meaningful, on a foundation of deception? That night, both Carly and Alexander went to sleep with mixed thoughts. Carly, excited about having connected with someone after so long, but cautious not to get her hopes up too quickly. Alexander, happy to have spent time with Carly, but tormented by the weight of his lie. What neither of them knew was that soon, very soon, that lie would be put to the test in a way that neither of them could have anticipated. In the days following their coffee date, Alexander and Carly continued to see each other at the supermarket. Their interactions, previously brief and formal, were now charged with a new energy, knowing glances, shared smiles, small touches of hands when passing change to any casual observer. It was evident that something was blossoming between them. Alexander found himself inventing more and more excuses to visit the supermarket. He no longer limited himself to buying a bottle of water. Now he filled a basket with products he didn't even need, just to spend more time at Carly's checkout. For her part, Carly surprised herself by taking a little more care with her appearance each morning before going to work. She applied a touch of lip gloss, styled her hair more carefully, small gestures that didn't go unnoticed by her co-workers. "Looks like someone has an admirer," joked Lucy, one of the cashiers, during a break. Carly blushed. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, come on," Lucy insisted. "That handsome guy who comes in every day, Alex, right? Don't think we haven't noticed." Carly couldn't help but smile. "We're just friends," she said, although she wasn't even sure that was true. Meanwhile, Alexander was dealing with his own internal conflicts. Each day that passed, he felt closer to Carly, more attracted to her strength, her kindness, her authenticity. And each day, the weight of his lie became more unbearable. One afternoon, after another visit to the supermarket, Alexander made a decision. He couldn't go on like this. He had to tell Carly the truth, even if it meant losing her. That night, he sent her a message. "Carly, could we meet tomorrow? There's something important I need to tell you." Carly felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety upon reading the message. What would Alex want to tell her? Would it be something good or bad? "Sure," she replied, after a moment. "Same cafe, same time?" "Perfect," Alexander answered. "See you tomorrow." The next day seemed to drag on for both of them. Carly was distracted at work, spilling change and making mistakes in calculations. Alexander, for his part, could barely concentrate in his business meetings. Finally, the time for the meeting arrived. Alexander got to the cafe first, choosing the same corner table where they had their first date. His hands trembled slightly as he waited. Carly entered a few minutes later. When he saw her, Alexander felt his heart speed up. She looked beautiful, in a simple but elegant dress, with her hair loose falling over her shoulders. "Hi," she said, sitting across from him. "Is everything okay? You sounded pretty serious in your message." Alexander took a deep breath. "It was now or never." "Carly," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "First of all, I want you to know that these past few days have been the happiest I've had in a long time. You make me feel alive in a way I didn't think was text here, real." Carly listened in silence, her face an indecipherable mask. "I know I have no excuse," Alexander continued. "I should have told you the truth from the beginning, but I was afraid. Afraid that you would judge me, that you would only see my money and not me. Because with you, for the first time, I felt like someone really saw me." Carly remained silent for what seemed like an eternity. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions: shock, confusion, disappointment, anger. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Was it all a lie? Our friendship, our conversations?" Alexander rushed to respond. "No, everything we shared was real. My feelings for you are real, Carly. That was never a lie." Carly closed her eyes, trying to process everything. When she opened them, there was a hardness in them that Alexander had never seen before. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she said, her voice shaking with contained emotion. "You made me believe you were someone like me, someone who understood my struggles, my worries. Do you know how many sleepless nights I've spent, worrying about how to pay the bills, how to give my son a better life? And you were playing at being poor?" Each word was like a dagger for Alexander. He wanted to reach for Carly's hand, but she abruptly pulled it away. "I'm sorry," he said, knowing those words were insufficient. "I never meant to hurt you." "But you did," Carly replied, standing up. "You made me believe in something that wasn't real. You made me fall in love with a lie." Those last words hung in the air between them. Alexander felt a mixture of joy and pain. She had fallen in love with him, but now everything was ruined. "Carly, please," he begged. "Give me a chance to explain, to show you who I really..." But Carly was already gathering her purse. "I need time," she said, her voice breaking. I can't do this right now." And without another word, she left the cafe, leaving Alexander alone with the weight of his confession. Outside, Carly walked aimlessly, tears blurring her vision. She felt stupid, betrayed. How could she have been so naive? She who had always been so cautious, so protective of her heart and of Max. Meanwhile, Alexander remained in the cafe, slumped in his chair, feeling he had lost something precious before even really having it. That night, at opposite ends of the city, both Carly and Alexander spent hours lying awake. Carly, struggling with her mixed feelings, wondering if she could forgive this lie, if she could trust again Alexander, tormented by the pain he had caused, desperately seeking a way to fix things. What neither of them knew was that fate still had cards to play. The truth had come to light, but its consequences were only beginning to unfold. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions for both of them. Carly asked for a few days off work, unable to face the possibility of seeing Alexander at the supermarket. She immersed herself in her routine with Max, trying not to think about what had happened, but finding herself constantly distracted. Alexander, for his part, was torn between respecting the space Carly had asked for and his desperation to make things right. Several times he found himself driving towards the supermarket, only to turn around at the last moment. One afternoon, as Carly was helping Max with his homework, the boy surprised her with an unexpected question. "Mom, why doesn't Alex come to see us anymore?" Carly felt her heart constrict. She hadn't realized how much Max had noticed Alexander's presence in their lives. "Sweetie," she began, unsure of how to explain the situation. "Alex, well, he had to take care of some important things." Max frowned, not satisfied with the answer. "But will he come back? I liked him, and you smiled more when he was around." The innocent words of her son hit Carly hard. It was true. She had felt happier in the last few weeks than she had in a long time. Meanwhile, Alexander was facing his own revelations. In a board meeting at Surge, he found himself looking around, really seeing the people who worked for him for the first time. How many of them had stories like Carly's? How many struggled day to day to make ends meet, to give their families a better life? It was then that he had an idea. He couldn't change the past, he couldn't undo his lie, but maybe he could use his position to do something good, something meaningful. "Gentlemen," he interrupted the monotonous presentation on the latest sales figures, "I think it's time we make some changes in our company." The board members looked at him in surprise. Alexander had never shown much interest in the company's daily operations. "I want us to implement a wellness program for our employees," he continued. "On-site childcare, comprehensive health insurance, continuing education programs, and I want us to review the salaries of our frontline workers. No one working full-time for Surge should have to worry about making ends meet." The room erupted in a murmur of surprised and confused voices. Alexander's father, seated at the head of the table, looked at his son with a mixture of amazement and pride. "Alexander," he said, this is unexpected, but I must say I'm impressed. What led you to this decision?" Alexander thought of Carly, of her strength, of her daily struggle. "Let's just say I've had a revelation about what really matters in life," he replied. As the board discussed the details of these new proposals, Alexander excused himself and left the room. He took out his phone and, after hesitating for a moment, wrote a message to Carly. "I know you asked for time and space, and I respect that, but I need you to know that what we experienced was real. You changed me, Carly. You made me see the world differently. And although I understand if you can't forgive me, I want you to know that I'm trying to be better, to do things right. If you're ever willing to talk, I'll be waiting." Carly received the message while preparing dinner. She read it over and over, her heart beating fast. Part of her wanted to respond, to tell him that she missed him too, but another part, the hurt and distrustful part, held her back. She put the phone aside and continued with dinner, but Alexander's words echoed in her mind. Was it possible that he had really changed? That their brief time together had had such a profound impact? What Carly didn't know was that soon, very soon, she would see concrete evidence of that change, and that evidence would force her to reconsider everything she thought she knew about Alexander Morgan. Weeks passed, and autumn gave way to winter, the city streets filled with Christmas lights, and the aroma of cinnamon and pine wafted through the air. For many, it was a time of joy and celebration. For Carly, however, it was a reminder of how tough the year had been. On a cold December morning, Carly arrived at the supermarket for her usual shift. She immediately noticed that something was different. There was an unusual buzz among her co-workers, all clustered around the bulletin board. "What's going on?" she asked, approaching the group. Lucy, her fellow cashier, turned to her with eyes bright with excitement. "You're not going to believe it, Carly. Surge has bought the supermarket chain, and look at what they're offering." Carly made her way through the crowd to read the announcement. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw the Surge logo at the top of the document, but what followed left her breathless. "Dear employees, we are pleased to announce that starting next month, the following changes will be implemented. 20% salary increase for all full-time employees, comprehensive medical insurance for employees and their families, on-site childcare program, continuing education, and professional development opportunities, flexible schedules for working parents. We believe our employees are the heart of our company, and we are committed to providing them with the support they deserve. Sincerely, Alexander Morgan, CEO, Surge Energy Drinks." Carly read the announcement over and over, unable to believe what she was seeing. Was this real? Had Alexander really done all this? "It's a Christmas miracle," someone exclaimed behind her, but Carly knew it wasn't a miracle. It was the result of someone who had opened their eyes to the reality of ordinary workers' lives, someone who had promised to change and was keeping that promise. That night, after tucking Max in, Carly sat in her small living room, the Surge announcement in her hands. She thought about what these changes would mean for her and Max. A better salary, healthcare, the possibility of continuing her studies. It was everything she had dreamed of. But beyond the practical benefits, Carly couldn't stop thinking about Alexander, about how he had taken their experiences, her pain, and transformed them into something positive. Not just for her, but for thousands of workers. With trembling hands, she took her phone and reread Alexander's last message. It had been over a month, but the words were still there, waiting for an answer. After a long moment of hesitation, she began to write, "Alexander, I've seen the changes you've implemented at Surge. I can't express what it means to me and to so many others. Thank you. I think it's time we talked. If you still want to, I'd like to see you, Carly." On the other side of the city, Alexander was in his office, reviewing the final details of the supermarket chain acquisition. It had been an exhausting month, full of negotiations and planning. But every time he felt tired, he thought of Carly, of her strength and determination, and found the energy to keep going. His phone vibrated when he saw Carly's name on the screen. He felt his heart stop. With trembling hands, he opened the message. As he read, a smile spread across his face. It was an opportunity to make things right, to show Carly who he really was. He replied immediately, "Carly, thank you for giving me this opportunity. It means more to me than I can express. How about we meet tomorrow?" I know a quiet place where we can talk, Alexander." That night, both Carly and Alexander went to sleep with a mixture of nerves and hope. Tomorrow would be a new day, a new beginning, and perhaps, just perhaps, the start of something beautiful and authentic. The morning arrived with a clear sky and a bright sun, as if the universe itself wanted to give its blessing to this new beginning. Carly woke up early, a mixture of nerves and anticipation fluttering in her stomach as she prepared breakfast for Max. She couldn't help but think about how much things had changed in such a short time. Just a few weeks ago, she was struggling to make ends meet. Now, thanks to the changes implemented by Alexander, she felt she could finally breathe, finally dream of a better future for her and her son. "Mom, why are you so happy today?" Max asked, observing her curiously as he devoured his cereal. Carly smiled, stroking her son's hair. "Because sometimes, my love, life gives us second chances, and today I think I'm going to take one." After dropping Max off at school, Carly headed to the park where she had agreed to meet Alexander. She saw him before he saw her. He was sitting on a bench, dressed casually, very different from the millionaire heir who appeared in magazines. For a moment, Carly allowed herself to observe him, noticing the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes anxiously scanned each person who passed by. Finally, she gathered the courage and approached. "Hi, Alexander," she said softly. He jumped to his feet, his eyes lighting up when he saw her. "Carly," he replied, his voice laden with emotion. "Thank you for coming." They looked at each other for a moment, neither knowing exactly how to proceed. There was so much to say, so many contained emotions. "Want to walk?" Alexander suggested, breaking the silence. Carly nodded, and together they began to walk along the park paths. The silence between them was heavy, laden with unspoken words and complex feelings. Finally, Carly spoke. "What you've done, the changes in the company, it's incredible, Alexander." He looked at her, a small smile forming on his lips. "It was all thanks to you, Carly. You opened my eyes to a reality I had ignored for too long." They stopped in front of a small pond, watching the ducks swimming lazily on the crystal surface. "When I discovered who you really were," Carly continued, "I felt betrayed, used. I thought it had all been a game for you." Alexander closed his eyes, the pain evident on his face. "I know, and I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. At first, yes, it was curiosity, a kind of experiment. But then I really got to know you. I got to know Max through your stories, and everything changed. You changed everything." He turned to look at her directly, his eyes full of an intensity that made Carly catch her breath. "Carly, these months without you have been hell, but they've also been a revelation. I realized that I don't want to go back to being the man I was before. I want to be someone you and Max can be proud of." Carly felt her eyes fill with tears. "Alexander, what you've done, you've changed so many people's lives, my life, Max's life." "And I want to keep doing it," Alexander interrupted, gently taking Carly's hands in his. "I want to use my position, my wealth, to make a real difference. But more than anything, I want to do it with you by my side." Carly looked at him, surprised. "Alexander, I'm not asking you to forget what happened," he continued quickly. "I know I made a huge mistake in lying to you, but I'm asking you to give me a chance to show you who I really am, to build something true with you and Max." Carly remained silent for a moment, processing his words. She thought about the past few months, about how Alexander had transformed not only her own life, but the lives of thousands of workers. She thought about the happiness she had felt during their brief time together, about how Max had lit up when talking about Alex. Finally, with a trembling smile, she replied, I think I'd like that." Alexander's face lit up with a radiant smile. Without thinking twice, he pulled her close and kissed her. It was a soft, tender kiss, full of promises and second chances. When they parted, they were both breathless, their hearts beating in unison. "So," said Alexander, his forehead resting against Carly's, "how about we start over?" "Hi, I'm Alexander Morgan. I used to be a spoiled and selfish heir, but an incredible supermarket cashier taught me the true value of life." Carly laughed, a joyful sound that made Alexander's heart leap. "Nice to meet you, Alexander. I'm Carly Sullivan, single mother, and apparently transformer of millionaire heirs." They laughed together, the weight of the past, few months slowly fading away. They knew they still had a long road ahead, that there would be challenges and obstacles to overcome. But at that moment, under the morning sun with the sound of birds and the murmur of water as background music, they felt they could face anything. Alexander intertwined his fingers with Carly's, and together they began to walk again, this time towards a future full of possibilities. 6 months later, the event hall at Surge Energy Drinks was packed. Employees from all levels, from executives to cleaning staff, had gathered for the inauguration of the company's new childcare center. Alexander stood at the podium with Carly by his side. Max, dressed in a small suit that made him look like a mini executive, clung to his mother's hand, looking at the crowd in amazement. "Today is a special day," Alexander began, his voice resonating through the microphone. "Not just because we're inaugurating this childcare center, which will allow our employees to work with the peace of mind of knowing their children are safe and well cared for. It's special because it marks the beginning of a new era for Surge." He paused, looking at Carly with a smile full of love and gratitude. "6 months ago, I was a different man. I believed success was measured in numbers in a bank account, in luxury cars and extravagant parties. But thanks to a very special person, I learned that true success is in making a positive difference in the lives of others." Carly squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with pride and emotion. "From today on," Alexander continued, "Surge will not only be a leader in the energy drink market, we will be leaders in social responsibility, in caring for our employees, in building community, because we have learned that when we take care of our people, when we give them the tools to grow and prosper, we all win." The room erupted in applause. Alexander smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment he had never experienced before. When the applause died down, Alexander looked at Carly and Max. "And now I'd like to ask the person who made all this possible to cut the inaugural ribbon. Carly, would you do us the honor?" Carly, surprised and excited, approached the large red ribbon that crossed the entrance to the childcare center. With Max on one side and Alexander on the other, she took the scissors and cut the ribbon. Another round of applause filled the room. Alexander leaned in and softly kissed Carly, not caring that everyone was watching them. "I love you," he whispered. "Thank you for giving me a second chance." Carly smiled, her eyes shining with tears of happiness. "And I love you. Thank you for showing me that fairy tales sometimes do come true." Max looked at both of them, a big smile on his face. "Does this mean we're a family now?" Alexander crouched down to be at the boy's eye level. "If you want, Max, I'd love to be part of your family." Max didn't respond with words. Instead, he threw himself into Alexander's arms in a tight hug. Carly joined the hug, and for a moment, the outside world disappeared. It was just the three of them, a family forged through chance encounters, difficult honesty, and a love that had overcome all odds. As the party continued around them, Alexander looked at Carly and Max, his heart overflowing with love and gratitude. He had begun this journey seeking to fill a void in his life, and he had found much more than he ever dared to dream: the heir and the cashier. An unlikely love story that had transformed not only their lives, but the lives of thousands of people. And this was just the beginning.
We'd love to hear if you're excited about this story. If you had a good time watching the video, go ahead and press 1. If that's not the case, just press 0. Your feedback truly motivates me to collect more heartwarming and significant stories. I'm going to turn this one over to you. What do you make of this situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart for getting involved in today's stories. Your love, support, and time mean the world to me.